This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include former legislator Connie Wilson, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, syndicated columnist John Hood, and political consultant Brad Crone. Before we begin this week's show, two announcements I'd like to make. First of all of us connected with NC Spin wish Dennis Wicker a very speedy recovery. The former lieutenant governor has had some health issues recently. We understand he's on the mend and improving remarkably, and we all wish you well, Dennis. And also, we are proud to welcome this week a live audience as we tape this week's show. They are the local state history class from Smithfield-Selma High School, and Trudy Farnell's class watches us every single week. We thank y'all so very much for that, and glad to have you in our audience this week. Well, this week the legislature took a big step in putting in place a new budget for the new fiscal year. As the House passed their budget recommendations, sent them to the Senate. We want to talk about this for much of the show, what this budget reflects, what might happen when the Senate puts their stamp on it. Let's get started. Well, the budget passed was $22.1 billion, a 6% spending increase over the current budget and almost 4% more than Governor McCrory's spending plan. In addition to spending increases, there were hikes in revenues, but all was not smooth sailing for Speaker Tim Moore's first budget, as some of his own caucus rebelled and voted against the proposals. They're sure to bring even further opposition when they reach the Senate. So I want to start by asking all of our panelists to give this House budget a letter grade, with A being excellent, F being a failure. Tell us why you did so. And John Hood, we'll start with you.
Tom, I guess I'll give it a C- because I'm a really nice guy. It
didn't sound that way in the column that you wrote this week.
It rates a D at best, but I'll give it a C- because, you know, I'm diplomatic and I hope for the best. I'm very optimistic. Spends way too much money, doesn't save enough money. It's been too long since the last recession for us to be running this close to the edge. They don't even put the statutory minimum into the rainy day fund. It's a mistake.
All right, Brad Crone.
I give it a B+. I think I clearly disagree with John, and you've got both the far right and the far left opposed to this budget, and the middle, the moderate, the Main Street folks see it as a progressive, a positive, upward lifting budget. It's a B+. It's the best budget the Republicans have put out since they've been in power.
Connie Wilson.
I give it a B, and I give it a B for strategy. Because in the House, it's very difficult to pull 120 people and a large supermajority Republican caucus together, like the Senate can pull together. So their strategy has been, we're going to have a budget that does a lot of things that a lot of people like, and that way we can have a better position to negotiate with the Senate. And I think strategically, that is a very legitimate position to take.
Chris.
Well, I'll give it a C- too, but for different reasons. I think that it still, there's a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of policy in this budget that was never debated in committees. There's a lot of ideology in this budget. We expand the voucher program. We set the stage for a private nonprofit university coming to North Carolina. It's going to get need-based scholarships. There's a lot of provisions in there. A lot of people don't still know what they're actually going to do. I think it's still a weak effort to try to bounce back from the recession. It does nothing, for example, for child care subsidies for school nurses. A lot of the cuts that were made in the last few years were not addressed at all. Much has been made of the new expenses. A lot of it is just to keep things at current levels, keep TAs in the classroom, and pay for kids who are coming to school.
And Connie, some of the discussion this week has been interesting. Republicans broke ranks with their caucus and voted against some of the proposals, saying that with a surplus this year and a projected increase in revenues next year, we should not be raising taxes on fees on people. Was this at all surprising to you, this rebellion, so to speak?
Republicans govern differently than Democrats. Democrats fight behind closed doors in their caucus, and Republicans are much more vocal out in public, in committee. I don't think it's a negative. There's an automatic tax cut that goes into place at least for corporations, because of the revenue, the excess revenue that's been generated. So there's continued tax cuts that are going to be had. But I think this is part of the process. This is the way Republicans govern, and may not be pretty all the time.
Let's look at what happened on Wednesday. A multi-millionaire GOP donor basically tries to hold the House Republican leadership hostage. Bob Luddy from Wake Forest said, I'm not giving the House caucus my $25,000 donation if y'all don't deal with this budget. If you don't cut spending, I'm not giving you the money. And then 5 years ago, the Republicans have the audacity to talk about Democrats and pay to play? Excuse me.
Well, this is one of the more interesting things. There's a political situation being set up here that by play that's really kind of interesting to me. In the last few years, we've had the House and the governor against the Senate. Now it looks like we're going to have the governor and the Senate against the House, doesn't it, Chris?
I'm not so sure. I think the Senate is not happy. The Senate wasn't thrilled with Governor McCrory's budget. They really don't like the House budget.
That's what I say.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think...
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Well, I'm not sure that they're going to be working together. I think we have almost a triangle here, although I think the House leadership, in terms of the Speaker, is still fairly aligned with the governor. It's interesting that you brought up the governor, who's been out of town. This was out of town a lot of the last week at the Republican Governors Association meeting and wasn't really engaged.
Well, we're going to talk some more about this after these messages, but if you like NC Spin and you want more, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. We've got exclusive video footage you can't get anywhere else, plus you can read perspectives from opinion leaders across our state. More balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or NC Spin on Facebook or at NC Spin Tweets. More budget news after this message.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
98% of farms are family farms. Families that believe in values like hard work, faith, and integrity. Farmers care for their crops, land, and animals because it's their passion and it's the right thing to do. They take pride in raising healthy, affordable food for your family and their own. Their livelihood depends on it. At Farm Bureau, we believe in farmers, their values, and their way of life.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
The North Carolina Homeowners Alliance strongly supports the Property Insurance Fairness Act in the North Carolina General Assembly by strengthening consumer protection, increasing transparency in insurance rates, and expanding North Carolina's ability to respond to catastrophes. The Property Insurance Fairness Act helps safeguard North Carolina's homeowners, communities, and the economy. Please thank your legislators for standing up for what's right.
We now return to NC Spin.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of those controversial issues that caused some rebellion among the House caucus. One of the provisions is going to increase deductions for medical expenses. It was thought originally just to be for seniors. Nelson Dollar was sort of opposed to doing it for everybody, Brad. He said, it's going to cost $54 million. What do you think of it?
Well, it's a very contentious issue. I think that it's probably an issue that's going to draw a lot of debate on the Senate side, too. But I think that it's an issue that they do need to address, even if it is a $54 million price tag.
We talked about renewable energy last week, John. The House wants to extend the solar tax credits for 2 years and other renewables for 4 years. Why did they seem to reverse positions?
Well, on this issue, there's been a lot of back and forth and back and forth. I think most of the members in the Republican caucus, on a principle or theoretical level, understand this is bad policy. But then there are some special interest groups that are throwing money around, throwing pressure around. There are also some rural lawmakers who are concerned about losing solar farms in their communities because there's not a lot else going on. I think the important distinction, for example, between this credit and the medical expenses deduction is that they should never have taken the medical expenses deduction out. That actually makes the tax code more neutral, because when you have tax-free health insurance premiums but then you tax people when they spend cash on health care, you actually create a distortion. So they should never have taken the medical deduction out, whereas the renewable credits, some of these other special interest legislation, violates the core principles that most of these guys and gals ran on.
All right, Connie, let's talk about the film tax credits, because this was really interesting. Not only did they put them in, $120 million. I mean, this raises it back to the levels that it was at before. So they've gone from zero back to the previous levels.
That's over 2 years.
Over two, I understand. 60 million a year.
That's exactly right.
Surprising?
Not really, because there is support within that caucus for those film tax credits. The Senate's going to not do them. They're going to be gone in a heartbeat. But it is going to be a controversial.
Like kissing your sister is not going to do you a bit of good.
That's exactly right. But you are talking $60 million. Oh, don't even go there, please.
That's all right.
But anyway, but I will tell you, they're probably going to have. That's a lot of money. It could have done a lot of different things.
How about all the DMV fees that are proposed to be raised?
Well, there was
a double the price of a driver's license.
Well, this is a version of a bill that was introduced in the House to come up with new highway money, also to lessen the increase in the gas tax that was built into an earlier bill. I think most of these things will, the House does this, I think, to raise more money for highways. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the Senate. I don't think there's a lot of support.
And then they were going to keep the gas tax higher for truckers than they were for...
And the trucking industry is already on alert, and there'll be a heavy lobbying campaign in the Senate against that provision.
So everybody that has anything to do with trucking is going to be there. All right. Well, one of the more interesting provisions in the House budget was one that would give DHS Secretary Aldona Vosch considerably more flexibility and freedom in reforming our Medicaid program. Chris, the House would freeze the amount of money, the annual appropriation, but essentially the legislation would get the legislature out of the micromanagement business for Medicaid. That's fairly interesting.
Well, and even more than that, it gets them out of having a lot of say over decisions except eligibility. And there was a heated debate in the House Appropriations Committee about this, and I think that there's two issues here. First of all, whether it's the right policy or not, which we can debate. Secondly, whether the current leadership of the Department of Health and Human Services is up to the task. We just had an audit come out that for several years, the last several years, we had a person working in the department, hiring relatives, hiring cousins, hiring family members at a couple $1 million worth. The Senate leadership, I think, is right to question the credibility and the management ability of the folks currently running the department.
The House of Management House of Medicine came up with a provision for Medicaid reform.
Absolutely, and I think the message that the House of Medicine's delivered to the leadership in both chambers is that Medicaid spending is predictable, and that the baseline has been consistent for the last 3 years. There is no need to reform Medicaid.
All right, Connie, Senator Tom Apodaca has said publicly there will be Medicaid reform this session. Of course, he also had said that he was going to favor certificate of need reform, which is one of the issues that you've been working on. Where do things stand now?
Well, what he actually said in the Senate Health Committee was that we would not end session without Medicaid reform and CON reform being dealt with. And from what we're hearing from the Senate side, CON will be placed into the Senate budget. Obviously, it leaves the House, it goes to the Senate, they work on it, and that puts it in place.
So is this House proposal for DHHS to essentially take over Medicaid, is that going to pass?
Well,
certainly not in the Senate.
HHS controls Medicaid now. But
I know.
You mean changing the rules?
Yeah.
Look, Brad's incorrect about this. Medicaid may be more predictable, but it is growing at a huge rate. Look at the numbers.
That's just not. That's
Look
not
at
the
the budget.
That is
not the case. You look at the budget over the last 3 years, the audit reports that have come out.
We have $1 billion increase this year.
It has remained consistent at $3.6 billion for the last 3 years, John, and they've actually increased the number of people who they're serving. They're serving 100,000 more people.
Please do. All right. We spend way more than $3.6 billion on Medicaid. That's the first mistake. The second mistake, we are talking about the state budget growth in 2015. So, if you will let me finish my point, you will understand it better. The increase the House budget has is $1 billion. Of that amount, almost $300 million is just Medicaid alone. Obviously, it is growing rapidly. Now, you could say, well, it's not growing 400, it's not growing 500. I'm glad it's not, but it is growing at a rapid pace.
They are projecting Medicaid enrollment to increase by 200,000 people in the next 2 years.
Growing.
Yes, it's enrollment. Yes.
Okay, so here's the deal. You want $350 million set aside for the next 3 years so that you can have a private insurance company from Tampa, Florida, and New York come in and take over Medicaid.
That's not the
to tell
proposal
our
on the
patients
table.
no and to basically
The
screw
current
over the
proposal-
doctors and the hospitals.
That's an interesting lobbyist perspective. The current proposal...
I'm not lobbying for them.
I understand, but that is the lobbyist position. The current proposal is to have ACOs, accountable care organizations, and MCOs in the picture. There is a compromise here. I think they're going to be moving in that direction. And because of enrollment growth, primarily, Medicaid is growing so rapidly that we cannot afford what lots of other
All right,
countries
we got to
wanna
take
do.
a break, let everybody cool down for a second. We're going to talk about the budget some more when we come back.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. That's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, I think things have calmed down a little bit. We want to talk a little bit more about the budget. One of the things that was in the budget was a 2% pay increase for teachers and state employees, in addition to giving teachers starting teachers a boost to $35,000 a year. As I said before, this is going to cost $300 million a year. John, how was this pay increase received?
Favorably by the public employees and teachers. They'd like more, but they appreciate getting across-the-board raises. Most of the money is the across-the-board. You do have the starting salary going up for teachers to $35,000. I think they'll continue to follow through on reforming the teacher salary schedule, but you're going to have to do raises. They had to do raises for all teachers. I thought the raises were too large, but almost certainly everybody...
Yeah, but Corey had proposed 1%.
Everybody favored across-the-board raises.
All right, Chris, let's get into education, because K-12 education had a 3% increase, according to the House. $100 million of that was for enrollment growth, so it left $169 million. But you're saying that it really wasn't that big an increase.
Well, you mentioned the enrollment growth, roughly $100 million. $88 million was to get the current level of teacher assistants in the classroom. Remember, those, I think 7,000 had been cut in the last 4 to 5 years. because
and they've been funded out
of one-time money. They paid that with one-time money. So now you're up to $188 million. The best thing maybe in that budget was $50 million for textbooks and digital resources, which were still well below where we were before the recession. But that's basically the House education budget. To keep kids, keep teacher assistants, and spend more money on textbooks. That's all a good idea,
Brad,
but it's not enough.
The universities got a $26 million cut instead of the $50 million that Governor McCrory had proposed. They left alone this teaching load business, but they put a restriction in there that universities can't spend more than $1 million on fundraising.
Right, and there was actually some movement on the Escheats Fund too, I think, in the middle part of the week that actually basically evaporated the budget cut. So all in all, for the universities, Tom, at the end of the day, I think they got to say, well, they dodged a bullet.
All right, Connie, the courts had been claiming for years. We've seen Democrats and Republicans leading the courts saying they're underfunded. The Chief Justice spoke to the legislature in a joint session. The House came up with $6.3 million more for operating money, $11.9 million for technology, and 70 new positions. The Chief Justice says, or the Administrative Office of the Court said they were very pleased with this budget. Is that the way it's been received?
Very much so. We have some wonderful co-chairs there, Rena Turner, some other folks that have been really working hard on this. But you also have Tom Murray now, who is their lobbyist. And having just been a former representative there and working the building, that's been extremely effective.
All right. John, was anything done about transferring money out of the gas taxes over to the highway trust fund, over to the general fund?
The House didn't take much action on that, but you can be sure the Senate is going to be focusing on that. That is one of the ways to free up money for highway investment, is to reduce the transfer of funds from the highway fund to the general fund, which primarily pays for the highway patrol. The idea is to move that into the general fund, where I think it should have been decades ago.
All right, we got to remind everybody that this is the beginning of the budget dance. The House passing a budget. Now it goes over to the Senate. The Senate is going to have their own ideas about how it's going to be received, and hopefully the peanut butter and the jelly all works out to the point where on July 1 we're going to have a state budget. What's going to happen over in the House, Chris?
You mean the Senate?
I mean the Senate.
Well, they're going to pass, I think, a dramatically different budget. One of the most telling comments Speaker Moore has made in the last couple of weeks was that they're considering taking the week of July 4th off as a holiday.
I think it's a great idea.
Well, no, that's normal. It's not a great idea, because normally that's their goal for adjournment. This means that if that's true, this means that they believe
Brad,
the session could go
what's
way
going to be the big
summer.
budget fight over in the Senate?
On the Senate side's incentives, clearly, one thing I think you need to watch for is the Main Street Democrats.
Wow. All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out, add your input, and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain, that's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
One of the best parts of the show is when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know, because this is totally unrehearsed. I don't even have any idea what they're going to talk about. Brad, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, watch out for the big deal. You know, John and I disagree vehemently on the Medicaid numbers and what they reflect, but he touched on something that's very true on a bifurcated system between your accountable care organizations and your MCOs. The governor of North Carolina wants to have a bond referendum on the ballot in November. The House is supportive, generally supportive of that. The Senate, not so much. The Senate wants managed care and Medicaid reform, so the big bargaining chip will be MCOs, and I think the governor will end up cutting a deal.
All right, John, tell us something we don't know.
I have a non-Medicaid announcement.
Well, that's refreshing.
TripAdvisor, the website, has ranked all of the states. You know, I like to rank states.
Oh, yes.
So this is a ranking of states on the basis of barbecue, the best barbecue to the worst barbecue. North Carolina did not win. Tennessee came in number 1, Texas number 2, Missouri number 3, and North Carolina number 4.
Oh, that's a bogus poll.
Yeah.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
Fixed.
Well, for years, Republicans, when they were in the minority, complained about state government taxpayer money going to nonprofits that weren't accountable to the taxpayers. It was a big issue when Tom Fetzer was chairman of the Republican Party. The House budget this year gives $2 million to a private nonprofit, Parents for Educational Freedom, to speed up the development of charter schools in Eastern North Carolina. The House has put it in the budget before. The Senate's never gone along with it. It's curious to me that we would turn that responsibility over to a nonprofit.
Connie, tell us something we don't know.
People hear about the policies that are being debated and the votes that are out there, but they don't realize all the folk that are behind the scenes making it happen, and that's staff at the legislative building. And there have been many long hours, sometimes almost 20 hours straight, where these staff people are working hard trying to get amendments, do the research. I was talking to Senator Berger about how hard folk were working down there. So it's been amazing to watch those staff do what they do, because there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, because in 2 minutes they put together, I mean, roughly 2 weeks, they put together a whole budget.
They do, and you have all these amendments, and there only may be 50 amendments that were heard, but there may have been 150 amendments prepared. So the workload is tremendous. Like I said, long hours. The legislators have been working hard, doing a wonderful job, but you have all these staff doing a great job.
All right, so Connie's been schmoozing now for the legislative public employees. We want to, again, thank Trudy Farnell and the class from Smithfield-Selma High School for coming and joining us as we have recorded this program. They watch us every week, and we appreciate it. You've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read our weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin's going to have a really great program. If you've been wanting to know what people under 35 are thinking, you'll want to watch NC Spin as we feature millennials next week. You'll love to hear what they have to say and get more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed, have a nice Memorial and safe Memorial Day weekend, and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.